if this was any other industry, I would say run, do not walk away from this company. Thank you so much for watching the video. Let's dive right in. So I'm not going to bury the lead on this. The thing that I think you need to be watching out for when you're watching other silver stackers videos in their content is sponsorships. Now, where did I get this idea? So this week, recording this video as of September 18th, 2025, it was a little bit slower at work this week, and I was able to listen to some more silver content while I was working on some things. And I noticed that multiple videos this week came out with a sponsorship from a company called Argenta Silver. Now, I'm not going to mention the name of the silver stackers in this. The point of this video is not to throw shade at them. And in fact, I'm going to give you my thoughts on sponsored content a little bit later in the video. But I thought that this would be a great opportunity because, you know, I am in no way an expert in mining stocks or in the silver industry. I think I know a decent amount, right? But, you know, the guys that were making these videos, honestly, they know more than I do. And I enjoy watching their content because I'm learning through them. However, I am a CPA and I have a lot of experience looking at companies, looking at balance sheets, income statements, financial statements, and knowing how to interpret them. So I thought it would be a great idea to demonstrate on the channel with the example of Argenta Silver. Let's dive into this company. Let's do some just basic research and see if they are actually worth, you know, looking at more. Again, not investment advice, but let's just go through the process together and I can show you what I would be doing if I was evaluating a company that I would be investing in. So let's switch over to the computer and check out Argenta Silver and see what we find. All right, now that we're switched over to the computer, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the stock price of the company. And as we can see here, looking at today, it's down a little bit, right? The market's pulled back a little bit on silver. But what is interesting, and I noticed this when I first checked out this stock earlier in the week, at the time, it was up 20% in a day. And that seemed a little suspicious to me. Again, as the timing of the video was coming down, I was seeing all of these videos coming out about the stock itself, about the company, and then to see a 20% rise in the stock price in a day seemed a little fishy. But I just analyzed it a little bit, looked at some of it. It seems like it's been performing very well over the last year. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. Let's do a little more digging. So in going to the Argenta Silver's website, again, this is the next thing I do. I'm looking at the stock price, but then I'm going to dig into the company a little bit, see what it is. And this website is a great tool. We'll have a link in the description so that you can check this out as well. You can see the stock prices listed up here. There's different resources on the company's website that you can see a little bit more about them. What is their business? What are they doing? And I think this section right here is really interesting because it's talking about a drilling that recently happened for them and this program in the El Cuevar project. And I'm sure I'm butchering that. I apologize. But that best guess on how to pronounce that. So I was like, okay, that's interesting, getting a little more detail and a little more information about the company. And so then I Googled, okay, Argenta Silver, let's look at the news, what's happened. And there's this project again. It says they've drilled this, there's silver over 40 meters. What are some of the other articles? The next big silver story is here, and they're referencing Argenta Silver Corp. It says that they're targeting major silver growth with a aggressive El Cuevar drill campaign. So it's okay. That's interesting. They're in the news. It seems like there might be some stuff going on. So then the next thing I did is I said, okay, what are some things that I need to be looking out for in the mining industry when it comes to these types of companies, these types of stocks? So I was able to find an article here that is from Investopedia, and it just talks about some key financial ratios that you should be using to analyze the mining industry. So what are some of the things that it says that we should be, looking out for? It gives some different, information on the mining industry, uses a couple of companies as examples. And then it talks about these key financial ratios. It talks about the quick ratio, right? Which that is just comparing your current assets minus your inventory to a company's short-term obligations or liabilities, okay? It talks about operating profit margin. It talks here about return on equity at the bottom. So it gives us, okay, when we go look at this company's financial statements, what are some key areas that we should be looking towards that may help this company stand out out as opposed to some others. So the last thing that I would be doing is actually from their website, Argenta Silver's consolidated financial statements. Now, there's a couple of things, again, as a CPA that I would be wanting to look for. Here, also, this says they're audited, right? That's a good thing. We want to see that they're audited. There's a couple of interesting things that we can make a note of. It does say that there's an assessment of impairment indicators for mineral properties. That's something to be aware of. So anytime that you have an impairment, that means that there's an asset that may be worth less than you originally bought it for, and certain assets you have to reevaluate on a consistent basis. So then we're going to go down here to the balance sheet, right, and the income statement. And that, I think, is where we're going to start using some of those key financial ratios that we talked about. So what are a couple of things on this financial statement that I would want to be aware of? So let's look at their cash, right? This says that the expression here, let's see, I think it's expressed in Canadian dollars. And so this is not in thousands or in millions. So we can consider this to be $9 million in cash is what the company has. We can see their accounts receivable, prepaids, yada, yada, yada. You also see that they have mineral properties here. That's in note 5. That's probably their assets underneath the ground and their evaluation of that. Again, you can look into note 5 to find some more information there. But let's talk about that quick ratio real quick, because it's talking current assets versus current liabilities. So this is interesting. They've got a lot of cash right now. $9 million, right? And then their current liabilities are really low. In fact, they've only got $763,000 in liabilities. And I think even better is if you look at their non-current liabilities, which is decommissioning obligations, you can see they could almost pay off their total liabilities here with their cash on hand. That's not bad. That is really not bad. That is actually a good spot to be in. Now, here's something down the bottom here. When we're looking at shareholders' equity, that is very unique to the mining industry. And if you look at it here, you see that the shareholders' equity, this is their capital. This is, stock, right, that they've and there's a breakdown here in the note that you could look at. So that's their stock. Look at this deficit here. Now, if this was any other industry, I would say run, do not walk away from this company. And that is because anytime you see negative equity, right, in this case, that is really concerning. Why is there negative equity? So what happens here is when you have, at the end of the year, let's say that you lost $3 million. Well, that deficit goes into the equity of the company, what it's worth. So what this is telling us here is that you've got 37, almost 38 million in shareholder equity, but then that is being offset by almost $27 million of losses. That is a significant amount of losses, ladies and gentlemen. Now, from what I said earlier, the reason that this is interesting to note is because if you think about mining, there is a lot of startup costs to mining. There's the, buying the property. There is actually getting in and finding the minerals, all the drilling, all the equipment that's needed. So there's a lot of startup costs that come into this. And from looking at Argenta Silver, and especially at that project, we're going to get back to that in a second because that's called out in the financial statements, that it makes sense why we would see this negative equity. However, I'm still on a pause on that, right? Because you are seeing that negative equity jump. And actually, in doing some other research on some other websites, they lost more money this year than they have in previous years. Now, why did they do that? Well, this actually can be seen if we scroll down here to this note. They have one in regards to, let me see if I can find it here. Here it is, finally. This acquisition, and I think this is actually really key. It says on October 24th, 2024, the company purchased all of the issued and outstanding shares of Silex for consideration of 3.5 million in USD, and Silex owns 100% in the El Cuivar silver project. So this was probably some of the reason why they lost more money this year, is they made this acquisition in this project. And from what we could see earlier, this might have actually been a really smart move on the company, because we are seeing all of that information coming out about just recently, right, about the drilling in this project. Again, not knowing the numbers, but could be very profitable. So it makes sense why that they may have lost more money this year, is because they were doing a strategic acquisition, again, potentially hypothesizing. And because of the strategic acquisition, they were able to find a good project, make some money, and do some good investing. So with all of this being said, we're going to switch back to the beautiful Canadian maple leaves on the screen and talk about what we can do with all this information. All right, so we checked out Argenta Silver. What's the verdict? Well, for me, I don't know, right? There seems to be some good things here, right? There seems to be, the quick ratio for them is looking good. We're seeing this new project that they have. It seems like that's been profitable. Again, not with a lot of knowledge or not investment advice, but it seems like it could be good. However, there's also some things that are like, that's interesting. Like the fact, and could have been a coincidence, but we saw all these sponsorships, right? And the stock price went up. Or the fact that we're seeing the huge deficits in their equity, right? Again, it makes sense with the mining industry and with more of a startup investment that you could see that, but that's worrying, right? So the whole reason that I made this video is I want to teach people how to do investments, or to at least at a basic level figure out how, or what are some signs, some trends to at least get a general understanding of what I'm investing in. Never, and I mean this, ladies and gentlemen, whether it's me or any other silver stacker, even with the best of intentions, do not just take our word for it. Why? Because we're biased, right? And now being biased doesn't mean that we're being unethical. But let's be honest, all of us, you're watching this video, you're interested in silver, you're interested in gold. You want to see it go up. You want the price of silver and gold to go up because you are going to profit from that. That's not wrong. That's just how it is. So with all that being said, what I just want you to be aware of is that there are biases, right? There's biases, right? Bias, whatever, right? There are bias that is involved in each one of these videos. And I want you to just be open, but think critically. Think critically before you invest your hard-earned money into these scenarios, because I've done that before with these videos. I've watched somebody, I've gotten hyped on a company. Sometimes that's done really well. I've got a couple of mining stocks right now. There's one in particular. I've made 422% on that investment, right? I've made thousands of dollars on that investment. And there's other silver mines I've invested in. I've lost 80% of my money. Right. And that was not using, and that was way before I started having a plan. I just said, a lot of people are talking about the stock, a lot of people I trust. I'm just going to buy a couple of shares. Don't do that. Copy this process. Do some basic research. See if you get good vibes on the company. Do you get a good feeling? Are you seeing anything that's concerning or troubling? And then at the end of that, make the decision that's best for you and your family. With that, we're going to end the video today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for watching. If this content was helpful for you, I'd really appreciate a like. I'd love to talk to you about the video. What do you think about channel sponsorships? What do you think about this process? Is there anything that you would add when you're investing or looking into investing into a different stock? And would really appreciate a subscribe if you are enjoying this content. It helps me out, but more importantly, it gets the word out about gold and silver. With that, be blessed, be a blessing to others. We'll see you later.